Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And this week we're going to talk about late work. But before we do, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. A fun thing that happened this week was I finished off my first NSF proposal. Like, we went through the date of the last date. I filled out the form for the last bits of charges that are going on the grant, and it's done. So that was exciting.
Wow, how long was it for?
Well, it was for 3 years, but then we got I guess you can often get a no-cost extension for a year, and we got one of those, so I guess it added up to be 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. I'm excited that it's like, I don't know. It's cool to have done a whole NSF proposal.
That is very cool.
Yeah. So that was great. How was your week?
My week was good. I finally got to go to like my favourite place in Dublin.
Ooh, where's that?
It's this like place that's quite near where we live called Howth, and it's sort of, I mean, it's not really now, it's like a suburb of Dublin, but it used to be like a fishing village kind of, I don't know what it is about it. It's just like there's a little pier you can walk along to a lighthouse, and it's just, wherever you go there, it's always completely different. Like some days, like we went and it was very blue skies and very chilly, but like it looks one way, and another day you'll go and it's grey and stormy and it looks completely different. It's just very, very cool. And you often see seals, so the girls are very excited to see
That's nice.
seals in the water. And I don't know, have you ever heard of a movie called Song of the Sea?
I don't know, it sounds familiar. What is
it? It's all about seals, and selkies is like...
Oh, of course, selkies.
Yeah, so the kids were very excited about that. And we also had... Ireland is currently having a COVID surge. And so I was like a close contact of someone who had COVID, so we had to go and get tested quite a few times. And I just cannot believe how amazing everybody is in those testing centres.
Really?
Like,
awesome.
Just like so chronically nice and so patient with the kids. And you're just like, how many tests do they do every day? And every time, because we had to get 3 tests done. So we did like a tour of all these different testing centres. But just literally everyone we interacted with was so cheerful and nice. And
wow.
It's just, I don't know what kind of person it takes to be like that during the middle of a horrible pandemic where they're like just doing, I don't know, hundreds of tests every day and just so pleasant and lovely. So yeah,
How
it's
nice.
very inspiring. So yeah.
Those both sound like really positive experiences.
Yes, yeah. It's weird. I mean, obviously being worried about getting COVID,
Right,
not great, but
yes, of course.
kind of
Having
nice
to go there
too.
in general, not great.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
But in a weird way, we kind of got to take a bit of a breather because the kids couldn't go to school and I couldn't go into work, and it's just everything's been quite frantic. So it was a little bit like we baked together for the first time in a long time.
Nice.
And, you know, like just a bit of a breather because everything's, so that was good. But so tell me, do you have a quote for us for this week?
I do. And so it's a quote that it's from one of Ralph's professors at Berkeley. And anyway, it's a whole scene where I guess the idea was that in this class you could miss one homework assignment or something like that. But Ralph was going on a research cruise and was going to need to miss 2. And so he came to talk about it. You know, is there anything that he could do? And the professor said something very striking, something about, it was the idea, the basic concept was, and this is the quote, don't worry about it. Like, you can't he wasn't going to budge, you can't hand in 2 homeworks late, we're only going to drop 1, so you're going to get a 0 on that other one, but don't worry about it. You're going to remember the research cruise much more than this particular homework. So he kind of transitioned, he held firm on the deadline, and he switched around and gave life advice instead, which was focus on the important things. Grades aren't everything. He didn't let grades get it to some inflated importance. So anyway, I think about that whenever a student comes to me to ask, oh, I forgot to hand in the homework. Can I do anything? I try to remember that. The answer's no, but don't worry about it. It'll be okay. This one thing is really not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things.
This is blowing my mind.
So anyway, it obviously transitions right into late work. But I just, that particular scene that Ralph has talked about, it seemed like it was impactful for him. And I've been finding it impactful just as a secondhand person thinking about, how to respond, and that was a good, meaningful response, you know?
You know, it just feels like to me, like there's just this thing, right? When you start teaching, and like, I just feel like I had to go through such a swamp of trying to understand what you do and don't have to accommodate. And just those words just feel like the words of an experienced educator.
They do, don't
who's
they?
just like in their groove of what they want to do, what's acceptable. They've seen it all. They're like, it's going to be fine. It's totally worth it for you to go on this cruise. But this is my rule. And it's just like, I'm so not there yet, but it's like, I don't know. It's just such a vibe of like, when you hit your stride and know what's what. But yeah,
you've got you're comfortable in the rules of your classroom, and you've got responses for the common things that come up, and there you go. I love it.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah. So we're talking about late work today, and while we were talking about it, I wanted to think about, I'm thinking of it in the context of policies for late work, but I'm also thinking about it helping students be successful. That's the whole reason you might consider having late work. And I'm also thinking about fair assessment. And Rachel Austin in our interview episode said being fair is one of the greatest gifts you can give your students, or something like that. And I feel like that's an important thing in the classroom. So I feel like what we're talking about in this episode is it can feel supportive and kind to give extensions, but most of the time, with a few small exceptions, I don't think extensions help. They sometimes hurt, and they're often unfair. And so, I don't know. That's kind of the context I'm thinking about in this late work thing. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that before we go into working and working on?
No, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. So what's working for you with late work?
I think, you touched on it there, but something that was very encouraged, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, was to just be totally loosey-goosey with deadlines and just get totally flexible. And I did, and it was just a total disaster. And it does not, it sort of was good in a way, because I've always been like, am I being too uptight about these things? And then to kind of swing completely the other way, it's just not helping. I think that when people are learning stuff, it's important to hold structure for them, because I have no self-control. And if someone was like, none of this is due until the end of the semester, I would absolutely end up in the end of the, the final week trying to do like 15 assignments. So that, I think, was like a really good experience to sort of see that and be like, oh, this was a terrible thing. And kind of reflecting too that, like, it's something that I've experienced a lot in Escala, the workshops that we did. But often when it's like, what is the point of this assignment? Is it like punitive in some way? Because if it's to facilitate learning, then they really should do it when you're learning the material, or like do it before the midterm, or, if you assign something and the idea is like, we just talked about this in class and now it's going to cement in your head, you're not really doing a service to people.
Letting them do it some other time.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And the other thing, though, like, I don't know if this is in working or working on, but it's something I'm thinking about, is like equity as opposed to equality. And so, like, I had a student phrase that as being like you can't give everyone the same size shoes, and people have different needs at different times. And during my academic life, I've certainly had times where people have completely changed the rules for me in certain circumstances, and it was really beneficial.
Right.
And I needed that at that time. And so, like, I don't know. Whoever Ralph's professor is, I'm not there yet. Like, I have not found my full confidence of where I land in those things. But I think I am recognizing, I think it's beneficial to the students to not have late work be just full-blown loosey-goosey. And I do think, like, having consciousness of what the point of your assignments are.
Oh, I love that.
Is really important. And And maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't something that's tied to the material you're doing in class, so it could happen whenever. But, just being aware of that. And
I
then
think
the
that's a
idea.
great point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. And then, yeah, but then equity, like just sort of people have different needs at different times and sort of being aware of that. But I don't know. Now I'm like super blown away by this thing with Ralph and like, okay, anyway, I'll talk about this in my working off.
Okay,
You go
okay.
ahead. So tell me, what's working for you?
Okay, yes. So I think what's working for me is having a clear late policy established from the
Yes.
beginning. We all know what the rules are, and then sticking to it so that the students can decide what to do based on the late policy. Again, I think there are very unusual exceptions. I'm comfortable with that. I had a student recently whose dad died, and we just gave her a week to, we're just not even going to talk for a week, and then we'll reestablish connection. And
Yes.
that worked out. She got totally back on track with the class. So that really rare, unusual circumstances, I'm still down with exceptions. But
Totally.
that's really unusual. The vast majority of the time, I think what I really like to do is to be sympathetic. Of course, I'm totally sympathetic to whatever these problems are, but that is separate to the late policy. And so I guess the thing that I'm super excited about that I just added to my syllabus this semester is having flexibility built in to the late policy. So the thing that I added into my syllabus this semester was they have 2 special late reports. So they have a whole bunch of lab reports that they have to hand in throughout the semester. 2 of them, they can up to twice, get an extra week on whichever ones they want. And I got this idea from another colleague, and because I got the same recommendation you did at the beginning of the pandemic of being super flexible with deadlines. I tried it last year. I don't think it worked for me, for my students. And so this semester I said, okay, I want to reestablish my normal late policy, which is, if it's late, you start losing points and it increases the later it is. But I felt like I still wanted some flexibility because things do come up, of course, and in particular during a pandemic. So these 2 special late reports have just been wonderful. It's happened so many times that a student has come and said, oh my gosh, this thing has happened. I'm super swamped. Can I have an extension? And I say, oh, well, remember, you have 2 special late reports. Just use one of those. And they're like, oh, great. And they go away. And everyone's happy. And they have not gotten a special exception. Everything's fair. Everybody can use these 2 things. It's just built in. Everybody knows.
So how long is it? Is it a week?
It's a week. It's 1 week exactly. Okay. And then the normal late policy starts applying again. And of course, some people used them early in the semester and then ran into another problem. And now, so that does happen. But I feel like that's totally fine. The point is, there's always things that could come up. And hopefully, your plan should be to not use them. But in case something does come up, it's there. So I don't know. I've really been into that.
So something you said just really resonated with me. Mm-hmm. I just want to highlight it. And it's something you said about it working for you. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's something that's so important. And I left it out when I was complaining about the late work having a total open door policy during the pandemic, because it's true. It's so hard to go back and grade things.
That's true.
Not in a big pile. And I think that that's a really important thing we don't talk about enough in us making decisions is what's going to work.
That's a good point.
For you, right? And so I really like that you said that. And I love this. And I don't know why I resist it so much. Having a clear late policy.
But you do. Yeah.
And I think it's something I want to get rid of, resisting it. But I think I have a really paternalistic, obnoxious viewpoint where even when you're describing it, I'm like, well, they're all going to use it in the first 2 weeks and then blah, blah, blah. And I'll be back where I started. But then obviously that's not been your experience. Or if they do, then you can be like, oh, that's a shame. Anyway, but I don't know why I'm just being such a Grinch about it. Where I'm like, well, these irresponsible students will just, but it's that's me having a really rubbish attitude, I think. I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you get to make it however you want the late policy to be. And so you can make it whatever you think will work for you. And you're totally right. Somebody can blow it on the first 2 reports for reasons that weren't that big of a deal and then run into a problem later. But hopefully that's the minority of the scenarios,
right.
Yeah.
And then you can still be a very sympathetic person who has been very flexible and be like, oh, well, you already used those. So
Totally. Exactly. And I
here's
think
a
part of
question.
it is being clear up front. You know, these are 2 special late reports and explaining what they're for. They're for the scenario where, you know, your car got hit and you have to deal with insurance. It's not for, I mean, it could be for whatever. But so basically, it's for those times when you would come to me asking for an exception. And it's also for the times when you have a whole bunch of assignments due this week and you're behind.
Yes.
It's for any of those times. Anytime. Yeah. So just being clear up front that it's there for whatever you need.
See, I love it. And okay, here's the question though, like about the implementation. Do you go on and on about it? Because you're saying that sometimes students come and they're like, oh no, and you're like, don't forget.
True.
So do you just say it once and then?
Well,
or
yeah,
do
this
you,
is
like,
this is my first time
weekly?
using it. I said it at the beginning of the semester. It's in the syllabus. A bunch of people used it early on, and then it seemed like nobody was using it for a while. And so then a couple people had come to me and asked for exceptions, and I was like, oh, just use your special late report. So then I sent an email to the class saying, hey, reminder, you have these 2 special late reports. If you haven't used them yet, you still can, you know?
Yeah.
And it is something I have to keep track of because they have, you know, if they use one, I have to mark down that they used it so I don't accidentally use it again. But I just have a little spreadsheet, and whenever someone uses it, I just write it. It doesn't take that long, but it is an added, I'll mention it's an added thing. Yeah. And then I guess I want to say one more thing that I think is working, which is when a student gets behind. I've been telling everybody this semester, and I really am into this, because, you know, if they get behind, they say, can I go back and do this thing? Or like, what should I do? Because it always happens that somebody gets behind, you know, and it's happened when I had firm late policies. It's happened when I had loose late policies. It's, you know, I think that's just always going to happen. But anyway, what I've been telling them is to forget the past, focus on getting on a good trajectory with the current assignments and content right now. And I've told them, hey, if you get on a really good trajectory and start, then I can weight this stuff that you did later in the semester higher than the stuff when you slipped up in the middle of the semester. And I don't know, that's a decision. I feel okay with that. I feel like the most important thing is them getting on a good trajectory, and I don't mind.
You have to have hope.
You have to have hope, exactly.
Right. And I think that's like such a, you know, when students do believe they can turn it around, that's such a big part of it. So
And
I love that.
Yeah. And I really do think the best way for them to learn the most out of the class is to, like you're saying, assignments meld together and they fit with lecture content, and like we've structured a certain way very intentionally. So going back and doing the old things would not be as good as just forgetting the old things and starting with the current things and getting all that synergy. Anyway, I've talked a lot about that.
No, I love it. And, you know, as someone like, you know, I sort of fantasize a lot myself about like a clean slate and I'm going to just go back to the beginning and start again. And it's so delusional sometimes. You know, when students, like when they have this idea that they're going to go back and do all the old homeworks and you're like, you're not, and it's not going to help, you know. So exactly. I like having that. That's better than just raining on their parade. It's like giving hope, and because
I think it's our job. Like, they don't know how long it's going to take to do the 5 lab reports that they're missing, or they don't know all the synergy that they missed. And so we do. So it's our job to communicate what the best plan is for them to do, because of course it's not obvious from their perspective. And I do think the best plan is often just start from today. What is the assignment we're doing today? And do that to the best of your abilities. And of course, it might use content from the past, so you'll have to learn that. But you're focusing on today and what we're doing today and moving forward.
Totally.
So anyway, what are you working on?
So it's sort of weird. You kind of sort of addressed one of them that you're working on, because I think like I am really flexible in secret. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is really unequitable, because some students don't ask. Do you know what I mean? And like I think like I do a good job of reaching out to people if they're not handing things in. But like I think this course I'm going to be teaching next semester will probably be bigger than my usual class. And so I don't know, would I be able to scale that up to a bigger class? And so anyway, just really like having, now I feel, I don't know why I was resisting it so much, but I was really resisting the idea of a clear late policy. So that feels better now. So I'm going to do that. And the other thing I think I'm thinking about now and sort of working on, and it's sort of weird, the thing with Ralph really like hit that as well, is like the idea of just sort of teaching that there is just choices you make. And
Exactly.
I think it's part of, okay, this is so patronizing again, but it is part of growing up to just recognize sometimes that you cannot have it all. You know,
Right.
like if you want to go to Hawaii for a week with your family,
You can totally do that, but you
right,
might miss some homework assignments, and that's a valid decision, but it is.
totally. But it's a decision. And it's sometimes, I think students, and again, usually when they're on the younger side, come in with this idea of like, no, but I should get to have everything. And they're like, no, but it's a really good opportunity for me to go and do this thing. And you're like, it is. And like,
Yeah.
you know, Ralph's thing, like he wasn't like going on a like binge drinking weekend or something.
Right.
Like he was going
He's
on
doing
an
this
actual,
great opportunity. He should totally do it. He's going to
and
lose the points in the homework, but that's okay.
yeah. And I think that that's like a really, you know, over here, people like that in this lab I've been helping with, like they're quite strict and you have to have documentation about why you miss things. And it's very, and someone was going on a trip that was like a, I don't know, something representing the university. And I was like, oh, well, clearly that. And the instructor was like, nope, that's a choice. Like if you're going, you're going. And I was like, whoa. But I think it is a really important lesson that like,
And that
yeah,
it's, I mean, I'm not saying you should go to Hawaii and blow off your class for a week, but I'm saying that's your choice. You can.
totally.
Um, yeah.
And it does, like, it's, well, because that person in particular, it was really early in my teaching. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they were like, yeah, so I'll come to your office and you can do the lectures for me. And I was like, no, let's not do that. But I think, yeah, like you can, because it felt like such a mean thing to say to people, like, I'm not accommodating you doing that. But I love this idea of just cheerfully, like, what a great opportunity. Have fun. Still not going to give you,
Right.
you know, like, I really, yeah, I love that.
Totally. I completely agree. Yeah, you're excited for the thing they're going to do, or you're sympathetic for the problem they have, but that doesn't change if they're going to miss the homework deadline, they're going to miss the homework deadline.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's just, you know, God, now again, sounding like a real old person, but there is this idea of like you can't actually have it all. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a really, I actually think that's a really toxic, negative message because it's sort of, if you can have it all, then you have to have it all. Like, you know what I mean? And like, I
Yes.
think you've hit on this a lot with essentialism, like, but you actually do have to make choices about things. And yeah, sorry, I'm just like having this complete like mind
totally.
experience live on it. I'm like, whoa, like this quote from Ralph has just derailed my whole life.
No,
Sorry,
I
but-
mean, I find it very meaningful too. And like, one of the things that it seems to say is like, it's not letting grades take an inflated importance. Like, it's so easy to be like, well, it's so important that you get this homework grade that, okay, we'll let you do it 5 weeks late. But really, you already missed the content back then. I mean, I don't know. Or, too bad. You know, it doesn't have that. What, 10 points of the homework assignment is not really that important.
No.
You should learn the content. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's really not. We're like blowing it up into this gigantic thing. When really we're just learning content, assessing how well you know the content with these established things, and assigning a grade at the end. You know, it's very. I don't know. Anyway, I'm working on that sometimes. You know, even though I specifically am structuring my late policy very clearly, and I'm trying to make it to encourage the students to do what I think will help them be the most successful, and I have flexibility built in, and I'm trying to help them get back on track. I'm doing all the things that I think are best. It doesn't always work. Sometimes somebody falls behind, and they're behind, and, you know, I mean, last year I tried giving plenty of extensions, and this year all the other years I've tried not, and there's always somebody who just gets too far behind. And so just being okay with that, and just trying to be communicating clearly along the way about what they should be doing to fix their trajectory and get back on the class. And, you know, I did send some emails this semester saying, you might want to consider dropping the class, withdraw from it. You may have, in our university, you need some serious and compelling reason to withdraw, but they may have that, and just saying, at this point, I think it's too late, and that's true. Even if I had a super flexible late policy and they could still hand in everything, I still think that's true, just because of the amount of content that they might have missed at this point. So anyway, just being okay that it's not always going to work.
I know, and it's so hard, but then there is times where you have that student who's just floundering, and then they come back next semester and just whatever has shifted, they're ready to rumble now.
Exactly.
And, I think that's super important.
I often tell the students... Oh, sorry, I keep talking.
No, you go ahead. No, go for it.
I often tell the students who are, probably going to fail and should plan on taking it next year. I tell them, you'll be in a much better position, hopefully next year, to really do justice to the class, learn it the way you want to learn it, demonstrate your learning the way you want to demonstrate your learning, and just, this wasn't the semester for whatever reason, but I think and hope that next year you'll be in a much better position to really nail it, So, I don't know, that's my hopeful thing that I tell them if they're in that situation.
Well, I love that. And honestly, again, this sort of harkens back to an earlier episode about changing major. But it's tricky with, but I think it's important. I've told students before, no, the hope is gone. Mm-hmm. You're not going to pass it. But I think that's important information because they could have another class that they could focus on, that they could get through. And I think, again, earlier on in my teaching, I would have kind of been maybe all the way to the end, and it's not true. And it's, again, you need to give people enough information to make their own choices. So go to Hawaii or drop the class and whatever it is. So yeah. Right.
And I love the way that kind of harkens back to the late policy thing. Give them the information of what they need. What are the rules of the class? I don't know. Ralph and I have been watching baking shows recently.
Great British Baking Show?
Of course, and then other ones
so
when
good.
We're waiting for that one to come out with a new episode. But anyway, in all of them, can you imagine you're in the Great British Baking Show and then there's, 10 minutes left and then they're like, oh, we'll give everyone an extra half an hour. You can't do that. That changes all the rules. It's definitely not fair. Everybody would feel cheated. So I don't know. I was thinking of that in the context of how you can't change the rules, I don't think. The rules are there.
I remember times as an undergrad where I handed something in and then I found out a whole other bunch of people got an extension and I was upset.
Right.
Because I didn't know I could ask for that. And so that's kind of weird that I've had this weird policy. But I think, it's sort of weird. Do you know how you set policies and I think I sort of set this idea of the late policy very early in my teaching. And I think I have changed my attitude to students that they're not fundamentally scammers. You know what I mean? But somehow I hadn't changed that aspect. I hadn't matched that up. So, yeah.
Totally. And I sometimes do get a feeling but the students that I had last semester, the information is out there of what my late policy is. But we can change it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there is a cat squeaking in the background. Sorry. Apologies. She
That's
wants
okay.
to go out. But,
Yeah.
Cool,
so are you
thanks,
feeling, I guess I just wanted to ask, you were saying you didn't feel good about late policy. Are you feeling okay now about having a late policy?
Yeah, I don't know why. Whatever way you described it, I'm like, that sounds fine.
Oh, good.
I think, okay, so one thing I think I do, this is a whole other thing, starting a whole other podcast episode right now, but one thing I do struggle with is dropping the lowest score of things sometimes, because that I have felt I've noticed students being well, I'm not going to study for this quiz because this will be my one. And you're no, that's not the way this is supposed to go or whatever. And, but I think, again, I just need to not be patronizing and paternalistic and just assume, I think sometimes too, I'm just scared of having hard conversations with students. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm oh no, if I give them too late, then they're going to come sort of, but they, I'm just...
Yeah, and isn't that okay, though? I mean,
Totally.
you want them to take all the quizzes and have the lowest score dropped. But if somebody decides they just won't take a quiz, I mean, that's okay. They
It's a
might be
choice.
disappointed later when they have another score that they did want to drop. But I think it's okay. It's not a huge deal, really.
Well, there's this
Right?
weird thing in parenting where, like, you kind of feel like at first when you have kids that, like, if you can just run around and have like 20 legs and arms, you can somehow avoid your children ever having any heartache or distress in their lives. And then at a certain point, it's like, okay, that's just clearly not true. And you just have to be there when things go wrong and support them and help them. But you can't navigate the landscape for them and smooth it all out. And I guess I need to apply that to teaching as well. And like,
I
you
like
can't,
that. That's an interesting analogy.
because it's so stupid for, and I'm like, oh no, if you give students this option, then they'll fall in this hole. So I have to like block that. And it's just ridiculous because, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Okay. I'm having all of these teaching epiphanies happening
This is
over
great.
here.
Me too.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Willie, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.